Hi, welcome to this episode of Industry Voice, where we're highlighting influencers, impact leaders, community creators, and today we have Bryan Falchuk on this episode. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing all right, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been a fun day, had a couple of fun recordings already, and now I
Cool.
have you.
So
And
bar's pretty high. Got to keep it fun.
bars high, but you bring the bar, so that's cool.
All right.
You and I, we have come across each other passing for so long. Well, since the last 4 years, since I got
Yeah.
on LinkedIn and started creating content. But we ran into each other in Vegas at ITC
Yeah.
Vegas. We recorded an episode reflection of ITC. You were my first episode recording on that one. And now we get to do another one.
Yeah. We went kind of from like not really sitting down together. We've now gone hard. This is the third time in like 5 days. I'm here for it though. It's awesome. We're making up for
Yeah.
lost time.
I interview you at ITC live on the spot in the creator booth, and then host ITC podcast. And now this specific episode is not about ITC, it's not about
Yeah.
anybody else, it's about Brian and your own journey. So let's deep dive into that. I'd like for our audience to hear about your personal journey. You know, you are very well rounded. When I say that, you have done a lot of different roles in different leadership titles and also in different areas, segments of insurance.
Yeah.
So if you can go into both your growth in your career and then bouncing around in different job titles
Yeah.
and different sectors.
And I think I always feel like I have to kind of disclaim this before anyone's like, oh, he's just been fired a lot or has no clue what to do. I was a management consultant, so it's kind of my background is to jump into lots of different things and kind of meet the problems where they are. So that's the firing's only a piece of the story. A lot of it's just like by the very nature of what I do. But that's how I got into insurance was I wanted to do management consulting work out of undergrad, and Liberty Mutual had or still has a strategy consulting team in house, and so I did a summer internship there and then flipped it to full time. So I spent 4 years at Liberty, two in the strategy team, and then two in personal lines, doing the same kind of work, just for the U.S. personal lines business. And that's where I got my footing, like exposure to lots of different stuff, commercial, personal, like U.S., international. Like I went over to Singapore and Hong Kong for a bit and did some work on their units there. Um, yeah, it was just sort of like formative years getting exposed to insurance, and I really like solving problems and jumped in on them.
I did not know that part. So I need you to deep dive into that Singapore, Hong Kong
Yeah.
insurance world. What's that insurance world like as American going in, right?
Well, I wasn't there too long. So it was like, in the order of weeks, but I studied Mandarin Chinese in college. And so I think I was just like, even though that's one of the languages spoken in Singapore and not the language spoken in Hong Kong, I think it was a default. It's like, oh yeah, send him over to Asia. But whatever, worked out. Um, to do them both back to back was wildly different. They're just extremely different markets with like the dynamics of the insurance market's different, the people are super different, the culture, everything about it. It was fascinating. We're personal lines and small commercial agents are super powerful there. I mean, it's not that different from a lot of aspects of the US market, but I think the agents um, this is like early 2000s. There was a lot more talk about the threat to the agent model in the US around the internet here than there was in Asia. In Asia, it was like you couldn't even fathom the notion of not having agents or changing the way that they work in any way, shape, or form. The other thing is all the agents we talked to had these Nokia communicators. Like they just look like giant phones, but then they plop open and they're like little computers. So they're like the mobile technology was just wildly. I'm a like total tech junkie. So I think I spent more time looking at like the thing that they all had them in hip holsters. So like checking that out. But it goes to show like the connectivity and the understanding of mobile communications and what that means to doing business was just very much more advanced in Asia than it was in the US. And I think that's a part of why, at least in my view, like the agents there's less of that talk of the threat. Like they were embracing change and not like how do we stop, anything that the internet or otherwise might bring. Um, how do we make that our own so that we thrive more? I don't know if that makes any sense, but at least like, early 20s white guy walking the streets of Hong Kong and Singapore. That was my take on it.
Um, Early 20s, white guy in Singapore and Hong Kong is a hot commodity. They love
I don't
white
know about
guys
that.
in Asia.
Well, so I went to Beijing when I was in college, and the U.S. had just bombed the Chinese embassy.
Oh my
Um,
God.
it was summer of '99, so it was not a good time. Like, it was definitely not a hot commodity. It was like the opposite. It was like, how do I hide?
No, bro. Like nobody really remembered that story. And
Yeah,
like we all have short memories because we all get bombarded with what's happening today.
yeah.
But a lot of people don't remember that US bombed Chinese
It was
embassy.
crazy, and it
Yeah.
supposedly was like the seat of their European spy operations.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, oh, it's just a coincidence. Well, was it? And yeah, it was not a good time to be an American.
And you were in Beijing during that time?
Yeah, I was there the summer after it happened. So like, I had to check the State Department warnings. I definitely got a lot of like wonderful relationships and kind people and a lot of hatred. And I remember like riding the DTA, the subway in Beijing, sitting across from these two guys who were talking about what they were going to do to me, and I could understand it all. And so there's a piece of me that's like, wow, my Chinese has come really far. Like this is incredible. It's a pretty complex conversation. But the other side of me, like, and I think this was the hardest, is I had no cultural understanding of what I'm supposed to do. Like,
Yeah.
do I tell them I speak Chinese? Do I just talk to them about something totally unrelated, like so they know maybe I understand? So I sat
How
there silently like an idiot and felt, terrible. Like it was, and obviously like somewhat scared, but it was more just that sense of powerlessness that was pretty wild.
how I have so many questions now. Like, by the way,
This is
I'm
not
looking
what
at
you
your
expected.
no, no,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
great. I'm looking at your LinkedIn bio, right? Was this during Beasley or McKenzie or Liberty
No,
Mutual
no, this
days?
was so that particular story was when I was in undergrad. I
Okay.
had like a fellowship to go study Chinese, and I taught English um, during the afternoons or whatever. And then when I was at Liberty Mutuals, when I was over in Singapore and Hong Kong, and that was just after September 11th, so quite a ways later. And that was, I mean, yeah, I went to Macau for a day, which was incredible, super cool. This was before, like, there were already casinos there, but it wasn't quite what it had become. It had just gone back to Chinese rule, but yeah, I'm really lucky to have all those experiences. It's pretty wild.
When was the last, by the way, viewers, I
We
grew up in
lost them.
Beijing.
Okay.
I grew up in Beijing, like I came here at 11 years old, and Beijing have changed a lot since you and I were
Yeah.
there. Like it's
Well,
crazy.
watching the Olympics, I didn't recognize anything because it was just starting to get built up when I was there. Like there were a lot of cranes, but it's completely different.
Yeah. The China transformation really happened within the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
Um, go back to your time in the insurance world.
Yes.
Like you're the perfect guy to go to InsurTech Asia with, whether it's InsurTech Connect Asia or InsurTech Connect Insights Asia.
Well, maybe. I don't like I
Dude, if you and I speak Mandarin Chinese at InsurTech Asia, like, bro, that would blow people away.
I mean, maybe just wouldn't expect what
No.
what would come out of my mouth. But and my Chinese is not what it used to be. Like I, could read and write and whatever. Now I don't even remember how to write my name. But yeah, I just like went on this journey basically through lots of different parts of the industry, and I got my master's and went to McKinsey and did work for a bunch of different insurance companies on different issues, which is part of why like I've seen a lot of different functions because it kind of get under the hood of, like that's my first taste of claims was a really major project for a US carrier on claims. And fast forward a bunch of years after Beasley, I went to Hiscox and was their chief claims officer for the US business, which is my first time working in claims. So I would be asked to speak to like young claims professionals about career development. I'd be like, I'm like the worst person to put on stage because my story is like stay out of claims as long as you can and just come in as the boss. Like I didn't work my way up from, like adjuster or anything. So I feel like that makes me a really bad kind of career speaker to a bunch of young claims folks. That's just my take though.
Wow, I had no idea this recording, this podcast would go that direction. I have like so many questions for you about your experience in Asia, but this is
Okay.
supposed to be about you. And I really don't want to derail this podcast, but I'm so, so, so curious. Do you miss the food?
Oh, of course. Yeah. And I remember saying going in, like people who had been told me like there's this McDonald's and there's just like Pizza Hut or whatever. And I was like, I'm not going to China to eat. But after like 6 weeks of eating like all, relatively speaking, the same thing, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind like getting something a little bit different. So I did 3 times in the summer that I spent in '99. I did go to once to McDonald's, once to I think a Pizza Hut, and then I went to there's a Holiday Inn that had this famous like Western buffet where you could get like cheese, and that was one of the things everyone told me like, oh, go there and get cheese. But yeah, that was terrible. But yeah, I miss the food. It's good. I like Chinese food a lot. Like actual Chinese food. I like Chinese American food's fine, but like actual Chinese food in China is pretty good.
All right, audience, I got 60 seconds. I'm still sure do Chinese educating on Chinese food. The first time I ever had egg roll was in this country
Yeah.
because egg roll is made in San Francisco. The first time I ever had broccoli was seeing broccoli was from a Chinese American style takeout,
Hmm.
and it was called beef and broccoli. And I was like, "What is this? I have never seen broccoli before." And if you're bored and wondering why, it's because broccoli doesn't exist in any Asia food. And if you're bored and wondering why that is, go Google, is broccoli real? And then I'll leave you on that one. And
All
then
right.
also in this country, we get a thing called brown rice, and 1.5 billion Chinese people don't eat brown rice,
Yeah.
and we just eat white rice.
Can we talk about Pharaoh,
Yes.
which people try to have me explain it, and the only way I can say it is it's like the inverse of bacon. If bacon's like meat with a little bit of fat throughout it, Pharaoh's
Yeah.
like a cube of fat that has a little bit of meat on it. And
Yeah.
I'd heard about it and was like, that's gonna be disgusting. I'm vegan, so I wouldn't eat it now, but back then it's like it's delicious. It's like
Yes.
terrible for you, but yeah, it's just like cubes of lard with a little bit of pork meat on it. But it's good stuff with some
It,
noodles.
is it terrible for you? Because I think we've been educated on a lot of things the wrong path.
Well, maybe it's not. I don't think eating cubes of lard is necessarily the best choice. Like if you round it out with other stuff, sure. But there are certainly worse things that you can eat. That's fair. But yeah, I definitely do miss the food for sure. And I never got sick. So anyone who's like, "Oh, I don't know," like, nope, never had an
I
issue.
might have to find some TikTok video to explain those things,
Pharaoh. Yeah.
and then we look at the healthy content, but we'll come back to it. Brian, so you are super rounded. You know a lot of areas to do consulting, and a lot of people on LinkedIn, they never get a chance to meet with you, but they know you for two things, right? Your podcast and your book.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those two things and how they got started? Thank you for all your support to our channel. Here is a quick word from our sponsor. Please click on the link below in the comment section to sign up for a demo with Track AI.
What if your insurance sales conversations could work harder for you? Meet Track, your AI-powered conversation intelligence partner. Track automatically captures and analyzes every customer interaction, providing instant call summaries, risk analysis, and AI-driven coaching insights. Say goodbye to manual note-taking and hello to more selling time. Track handles the admin work while you handle the revenue. Fully integrated with your favorite platforms. Plus, get custom AI analysis tailored to your unique business needs. Transform your sales team's performance with Track. Visit track.ai today.
Click the link in the description below to schedule a demo with Track today.
So it started with the books, and the books started with a book. So I wanted to like I used to be really overweight, and I've written a couple of self-help books, and I think one of the, at least for me, one of the most useful ways to inspire change is to see someone who faced a lot of the same barriers that I faced, or maybe more, and they still overcame what they faced. And so I was like, I think as an industry, we need that, because we talk all day about everything that's wrong, everything that's backwards, everything that's difficult, why we can't change. And it's all valid. But at the same time, there are companies that are pushing ahead anyway. Like, oh, we can't because of regulation. Well, like, here's companies that did that thing that you said can't be done that the regulators won't approve, and they approved it. So obviously, like, you can. Maybe you just need to think about it differently. So I wanted to tell some of those stories. And through my work, I was at an insurtech running sales, and I kept, going to these carriers and hearing about all the issues they're facing and what they're doing about them. And I was like, I want to tell some of these stories. So started with this book, The Future of Insurance, and it's 7 case studies of like legacy carriers doing something interesting and innovative despite the things they face. And the thing is, the stories are all firsthand. So like I got in with the teams that lived them. It's not, I didn't like read press releases and write my own version. I actually talked to the people who did it. So that's number one. And number two, you had to be willing to tell like the nitty gritty truth. So like, it's not just you go to a conference and people present about something they've implemented and it's all perfect. It's like, oh, it's on time, it's on budget, everything's great. Here's the, the employees love it, the customers love it. That's not reality. So if you want to be in the book, you have to tell actually how it went, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's where the lessons are. Like, listen, we like this did not go as planned. Here's the problem we faced, or like we had a falling out with the vendor. The vendor went bankrupt halfway through, or like, whatever, stuff happens. So it was really well received, which is awesome. And pretty soon after that, I started the podcast, which is just another way to get people on to tell those stories. And then I realized those were legacy carriers. What about the startups? And there's a ton of lessons from startups. So I wrote another book with 8 stories of startups. And then got some help from David Gritz from InsurTech New York. And we wrote another one that's on collaboration of InsurTechs and legacy carriers. And then my friend Teresa Blissing, who is much more of an expert on Asia than I could ever be. She runs the Asian InsurTech podcast with a guy named Michael Waits. She wrote the book on Asian case studies, which is awesome. And I think it's really fascinating outside of Asia, especially like in the US or Western Europe, to look at what's going on in Asia as an example, because of, it's a much more mobile first society. The product landscape is really different. Insurance penetration is a lot lower. So I've seen solutions for new insurance thinking that I think will come over to the US, to Europe down the road. But we should almost be looking at them as like, I'd say the same thing about Africa, actually. What can we learn from these other markets? And that's stuff I've been putting out for a few years, and I've gotten to talk to a lot of audiences and conferences and whatnot. And yeah, it's been pretty cool. I like challenging people to think about how we can do better. And I've gotten to do that through the books and the podcasts and all the speaking that I get to do.
Your book, I have seen a lot of people posting about it and about reading it. What is the one common thing you always hear people bring up when they just got done reading your book?
That's not something I've ever been asked. I think it depends on the audience. So for folks on the like solution provider or service provider side, a lot of them are like, this really helped me understand the buyer. Like if they're selling into carriers, it helped them to understand kind of what's going on under the surface and why it can be tricky for an insurer to try something new, and give them a perspective of how to message that better and how to be a better support to their carrier customers. But for insurance company things, what I find is like, it's this insurance company people, it's this like refresh of hope. And I think it's really easy to get beaten down into like all the things that are impossible. And so it's helpful for them to hear like, oh yeah, we have all those constraints, but there's someone who did it. And it's like I said, on the self-help side, it kind of gives you a bit of that energy to go after it again, which is cool, because I think a lot of us had that, and it's not that it gets beaten out of us, but when you like day in, day out aren't able to make progress, that can be demoralizing, and you just sort of fall into a pattern of, same old, and kind of giving up on pushing hard. So it's been cool hearing people kind of come alive. And then that helps their company, it helps their peers, it helps their customers, it helps their agent partners. So those are the themes I hear, but I don't hear one thing because I think it depends on who the audience is.
What about your podcast? Like when you made this journey, how many episodes have you recorded so far?
Uh, like 160, I think.
160.
Yeah, about that. And there's about
If you had
150 that have
to,
come out.
if you had to go back, and I know this is not fair, right? But if you had to go back and talk about who left some most memorable recordings on your podcast.
Whoa. I wish I hate getting questions ahead of time because I think a prepped interview just doesn't feel natural. But I'm like, I wish I wish I knew that one because I would have looked through and I would have trouble figuring it out. I have used a couple of episodes in talks I give where someone said something that's just like that makes such a critical point about what the industry is facing. And the person who's done that, like this is one section of one of my sit downs with my friend Nick Lamparelli, where he so hit the nail on the head on kind of the changes in the notion of underwriting. And I think I've used that clip like probably 10 or 15 times on stage, and thank God I don't have to pay him a royalty. Um, but that's so like in terms of impact, that's probably one of the biggest that like Nick really got at the heart of traditional approaches to actuarial models and underwriting and pricing. You basically watch your business erode from under you when you're just using historical losses. And then, like, once a year, you review the product and the filing, and then you file it and you got to wait till it's approved. So by the time you get the rate change, it's like well past when that would have been sufficient. And so you just kind of keep watching things get worse. And the notion I was trying to inspire people to take is like we need to change the way we go about thinking about rating and pricing and just the tools we use, the attitude we have, the whether we're admitted or surplus lines and how we file, et cetera. And it really hits home. So if I had to pick one, it's probably that. But honestly, like there's some folks that I'm really lucky to have had them on the show. Some really like major CEOs of major carriers, and then I've got people who maybe don't have that title, but it's just it's pretty clear that like that's someone to watch and they get it, and there's some really cool stuff going on. And then I've gotten to sit down with a lot of founders. Um, like if you haven't heard Kyle Nakatsuji from Clear Cover, Kyle's awesome and he regales audiences anywhere he goes. He's awesome. I've sat down with Rick McCatherine at Hippo a couple of times, like once pretty early on, and then I just sat down with him at ITI, and they were kind enough to give me the recordings from it so I can make it an episode. And Rick's just like a straight shooter. Um, he's pretty honest about what's going on there and what they're trying to do, and I always appreciate that. But you know this, like I also get a lot of time off camera with them, and so like there's people who just you can tell that they're the real deal, and like they're giving you their real mind in all those conversations. So I value that tremendously. I've had a couple of duds, and you didn't ask me that, but you can
Go
feel it.
ahead.
Like I had someone who sent me a note after I released an episode, and it's like a big insurance influencer kind of person, and he's not American, so he's like, "Mate, you really blew that one." I was like, "Wow, thanks." He's like,
Wow.
that was you shouldn't have had them on." I was like, "Yeah, I hear you." I think there's upsides to every guest, and I think there's things worth hearing. But yeah, his point was just like that wasn't it wasn't someone being genuine and honest. It was someone being like PR and communications department controlled, which is not the purpose of any of what I do. Like that's fine. There's tons of places you can go and basically like do an ad for your business. If you want to come on my show, you got to be real. That's all I ask. And some people, it's just not how they're wired, and that's totally fine.
You can tell like when they go really fast, it's felt like a pitch deck and it's like slide to slide to slide.
Yeah.
And then there's some people just like literally like veterans that are giving podcasts and just so chill, so laid back.
It's just a person.
Yeah,
I did
and
have
I
one
think
person I didn't release because it was so bad. And he so didn't get it. And his PR person even, she listened in and she's just like, I think it might be better if we don't. I was like, yeah, that's not coming out. This is not going to do anyone any good.
you know, I love this show, and I get to interview creators, right? Creators, and
Yeah.
also most importantly, like everybody are veterans at interviewing other people. But you just flip the desk around, but we still have the mic, we still have the camera,
Yeah.
and if I have rate like some of my best interviews, and Nick was a fantastic one, just like you give him
Yeah.
shout outs, I'm gonna give him a shout out because I had him in my early days,
Yeah.
like 30 days ago, in my early days of doing this podcast thing. And he is talented individual and he is sharp and smart. Just, yeah,
He's
he's
so
great on
many
the mic.
ideas. Yeah. And
Yeah.
he's not afraid to say whatever he needs to say. Um, but I think like if I were to boil it down, the thing that I look for this in a guest as much as I do like in a leader I would follow is, and you and I talked about this in the ITC recap, is hubris. Like if I feel like someone is humble and genuine, I'd follow them all day. And I think that makes for a really engaging conversation. But if I
Yeah.
think someone's sitting there like, I'm perfect, I have all the answers, and I'm the only one who can save the planet, I'm kind of like, really? You're probably blind to so many ways you can improve and be better, and people who could also be great are probably like disgusted by that approach and wouldn't follow you. And so that's what made that one episode kind of like not worth releasing. The guy was just way too high on himself and had all the answers. And I'm like, well, why aren't you doing more then? Why aren't you doing better? Like, why is your, and he kept like saying things that he thought were so tremendous. Then he'd like drop back like this, like threw his arms back, and he actually made like a bomb going off sound at one point. He's like, I was like, I don't like, you didn't say anything. That was, I'm not like, I'm sure he's a great person. It didn't resonate. And I was just like, there's nothing to this. Like you just be a real person for a minute and relax.
Okay. I'm gonna have to ask you this question because come to my mind.
Okay.
If you get 1 hour and making some of the best content, you gotta make like good content, right? But like real. And you only get 4 squares on the screen and you're one of the screen. They could be leadership, they could be creators. Who should best for? That
Whoa.
includes yourself included.
I don't think I can be. Like
No, no,
I'll
no. You have
moderate it, but
you're hosting it, so you got to bring 3 more on.
um well, I think we all owe it to Nick at this point, so he's got to be um I would say like Kyle is a good, it depends on the conversation, but I think Kyle would be good because he's real and willing to challenge, and he delivers a message very effectively, and I think that matters. Um oof. I honestly like that's not a fair question. I don't like you anymore, Jeff. Because there are a lot of people that I
So
would
many
be
good people
just,
out there, right?
yeah, like why only four? And I took one of them. Like that doesn't work. I don't feel good about that at all. Um, there was a there's a CEO of Allianz Life who I had on my show. I haven't really seen enough of her to fully know if I've got this right, but I think she's pretty amazing. Her name's Jasmine Jirali. She like seeing her off cameras where I was really like, she's super open and thinking about what's possible. So I think part of me is like, I'd love to get her back on and see kind of where that goes. And I think Kyle, they wouldn't butt heads at all, but I think Kyle would say things that she would get very excited about and like start take because she was like taking notes furiously on ideas she was hearing. Um, so I'd be really curious to get her in that mix. But I don't know. Like that's a really good question, and I also hate you for asking it. Is that fair?
All right, let me hit you with something easier. I'll hit you with something easier. If you, out of all the people you know, and have you seen fantasy football formats and how we draft teams?
A little bit.
Okay. In a fantasy football format where you can just create whoever you want to create,
Yikes.
and you are the founder and you're sitting on $100 million fund, and you can build your own company.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you're not in a role, you're just a background as an investor, but you get to pick your own team.
Yeah.
CEO, CTO, CFO, COO, and then add chief product officer and chief insurance officer in there, and then add a general counsel in there. You know so many people, so you can put this list together.
God. So best insurer I ever got to work for or with was Hiscox, easily. And it was most of the team that I got to lead with, the C-suite there in the US. So CEO for me is a no-brainer. It'd be Kevin Carriage, who just left as CEO. Um, he's incredible. So that one's easy. General counsel would be my number two at Hiscox, who's the GC at AppBay. And the other thing is, like, I don't know if all these people want to have their names thrown out there or not. But Tara
They
knows who
work
she
pretty
is.
hard in a career to everybody build their brand, right? So
Yeah.
you are drafting a fantasy football team of the ultimate insurtech startup with $100 million backing it.
Well, and I'm super cheap, so it's like, would I just take the money and be like, I'm good? Um, but yeah, so Tara Bodden is the GC at AppBay, so I put her in as GC, and she could run claims too, because I think she's still running. Yeah, she's still head of claims. But it depends what lines of business we're in. I think I'd be in specialty lines because I spent 10 years there and I love it, and I think it's
Yeah.
brilliant and
One of the fastest growing line. One of the fastest growing line in the US. Biggest sector.
profitable, and yeah,
Yep,
like,
and profitable.
and it's super interesting. And I did a little bit of time in med mal. If you think the claims are interesting in med mal, you're a terrible person. If you think the claims are interesting in the rest of professional liability and D&O and stuff, like, they're just fascinating without you being horrible. So um, I think that's really interesting stuff. But yeah, I like, this is your questions
All right.
are amazing and way too hard.
You have CEO. Oh, this is easy. This is softball for you.
Oh
You
my
have
God.
CEO, you have general counsel down. Who is your COO and who is your CFO? And
So
then we get
my
the hard part.
COO would be her name has changed from when she worked for me, but Jennifer Krawick, I think is how you say her last name. I've never actually heard it since she got married again. But she was like, when I was running ops for Beasley in the US, she was my number two. She took over so much better than I could ever be. Like, she is, everyone's got their list of, like, if I could ever worked with this person again. So Jennifer for sure, as COO. Um, Gosh, man, that's really, really tough. Uh,
Audience, we're catching Brian on pressure,
well, and
building his
like,
ultimate insurtech company.
there's people I really, really care about, and I can't name everyone, and that's like, that's hurting me. Uh, if so, I have an alternative to Jennifer, and that's Camille, who I also got to work with at Beasley, Camille Bianic, who could definitely be COO as well. Man, this is some tough stuff. Uh, yeah, I don't know.
CFO, CFO.
CFO, I don't know enough CFOs to know. Like, I've gotten to work with some were great. One of them is one of the dirtiest people I've ever met in my life, so probably not him. But yeah, I don't know. CFO is a tough one.
If he can keep everybody out of jail, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he might go, but no, yeah, CFO is a tough one. They just need to be, you know, obviously, like, know their stuff. But also, I think they have to have, all these people have to have a growth mindset, because if you don't, then we're screwed.
Where would
And
you HQ the company?
it's irrelevant. Like, for tax reasons, there's an answer. For geography, there's an answer. But then, if you base a physical location somewhere, you're inherently going to limit your talent. So
Mhm.
that's a tough one. Uh,
We'll come back to the tough one.
yeah,
We'll go to
these
softball
questions are
again.
only tough ones. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Like, there's a lot to this, but growth mindset, and if you're even remotely political, I will fire you in 3 seconds. I've put up with some and witness some of the most atrocious behavior for the sake of people trying to get ahead. I will never, ever abide that. And anyone who works for me knows this. Like integrity is of the utmost importance to me. If you ever think about how you can get ahead, you have no place in my organization, 100%. And anyone who's thinking otherwise, would you really want to be that kind of person? Like, would you want your kids to be that kind of person? Would you want to marry that kind of person? Or no, be a good person. Don't play games. Just be good. Like, be good
Yeah.
at your work. And what if you put the energy you're putting into politics into actually just doing an amazing job? Probably take less
Yeah.
work and you do much better and you wouldn't piss people off. So, little things like that.
Your chief people officer, now that we're talking about hiring,
So
firing
I
good
just
people.
I just keep hoping like if I go on enough, you'll just forget the question or move on.
No? Who would be the
Um,
best at recruiting talent in your opinion? Like who you putting this together
Well,
a
wait,
venture team, right?
recruiting or developing or
Both.
standing by the value, like I don't know.
They
That's a
gotta have a little bit of all skill sets to be a chief people officer, right?
yeah. I know some great ones, but I also don't know enough how they do on some of the other pieces of the puzzle. So that's a tough one. And I don't know that I would try to solve for everything in one person, but I'd want that person to build out the right team. See, I don't know.
Chief claim officer.
So I mentioned Tara, she could do it. Depends on the lines of business.
Yes.
Um, So this is a mean question to ask me because I've been in claims for a while. I
That's
run a
why I
claims focused
asked.
organization. So I have a lot of friends who are chief claims officers, and they're like, you didn't name me, but I think lines of business really matters. Um, for me, like I would always trust Taro's judgment because I've seen it in action over and over again. But but yeah, I don't know. I could also there's someone else I know wouldn't want me to say her name, but she wouldn't mind being on the list, but wouldn't want to be called out publicly, probably. Um, yeah, tough. It's too tough of a question, man. I have options. I don't know that
Chief
any of you would want to
underwriter,
work with me again, but I have options.
chief underwriter officer.
Um, if he had experience in professional liability, I would say Nick Lamparelli. But he doesn't. No, I
It's a
mean,
good
he
one.
has some, but like he's more of a property guy than anything. But yeah, again, like I've worked with a bunch of CUOs in this space, so I'm hurting feelings now. You've just destroyed my career, like, or at least my friend network. This is an incredible question. Yeah, I don't ah. And I mean, the other thing is like I've met a bunch of people along the way that just not necessarily coming to mind right away because I'm thinking more about people I've seen directly in action, you know?
Brian,
Um,
I'm saving the easiest question for last.
okay, so that
Chief,
one, can we move on to that one
chief,
now?
chief technology officer.
Oh, okay.
Walking into the AI era and everything embedded, connectivity, AI.
You haven't asked me who would be CEO. Oh yeah, you did.
You did. That
Um,
was the first.
so I said Kevin Carriage. I actually should probably change my answer. And it's nothing against Kevin, but we talked about like I went off on my man crush point. Um, yeah, so Rob Shimek, who's the founder and CEO of Bolt Tech,
It's a good
he's
one.
yeah, he absolutely should have that should have been my answer right off the bat. Um, there's a guy who works for Kyle Nakatsuji. Um, and I don't know why I'm blanking on his name this second, but he's who I think I would make CIO, Adam Fisher. Um, he's their chief product and innovation officer, so he's not a clear cover. I don't know whether he would want to be a CIO or if that'd be the right spot for him, but he's awesome. But there's a lot of great people, dude. This isn't fair. You
We
could
wrap
just
it up with CMO and CTO. You still
Oh,
got it.
CMO's easy. All right, so CMO, I would stick my friend Russ Finley in. Russ was a CMO at Hiscox when I was there, and we've stayed in touch. And he just gets it done. Either him or my current VP of marketing at PLRB. Danny is incredible, and Russ helped me hire her. But yeah, either of them, but I don't know. We've already sort of poisoned her and ruined her with getting into insurance. I don't know if she'd really go all the way to working at an insurance company. Um, but yeah, they're both awesome. Like a lot of these are people like I need to have seen them in action in that role. You know what I mean? And that's why maybe it's more of a limited list, or there's people who could totally be on the list that I just haven't directly worked with. So that's my excuse for not naming people who are like, how could you leave me hanging?
Somebody still got to build a tech chief architect builder. Who is launching this $100 million insurtech company that's going to be a unicorn?
What do you mean launching?
Like building it. Who's building the tech platform, the full stack?
Well, I think Adam, who I mentioned, Adam Fisher, he could do
Oh,
that.
Adam's the builder.
Yeah, he's a tech product guy.
Okay.
So I think him, or the other person I would say is Joe Emerson, who's a
Mm-hmm.
co-founder and CTO or CIO, CTO, I think, at
CTO
Branch.
at Branch.
Joe's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Joe and Steve are awesome. Like they're both incredible.
I
So yeah,
spent 2 days. I spent 2 days in person with Joe at a mastermind event that I put together. I take credit in
yeah,
that one. It was one of the coolest events I ever put together called Founders Founders Mastermind. It was some simple name, but we had 11 guys there with 1.1 billion institutional money behind us. Everybody is C-suite, we're founders,
yeah,
and we spent 2 days in Boca Raton and just deep dive into everything about our business. And people there had 20 people company to 300 people companies.
yeah.
And we talk about different phases, pre-C, C, A, B, C. And random story from that event, we were going to dinner one night and Joe was driving a rental Mustang. And there was four of us in the car, everybody 6 feet and plus. I think everybody 6'2" and plus in a Mustang. And we got rear-ended.
4 insurance people get rear-ended in a Mustang.
And it was a BMW 5 Series rear-ended us and then took off after we all pulled over to the side and this guy took off.
I was going
And
to say,
we're
of
like,
course, it was a BMW driver, but I didn't actually just say that, but I might have.
in
Yeah,
Florida on top
yeah,
of that, right? Like, and then like we got out the car, we looked at the car, we're like, oh, it's not that bad. Like it was barely a dent. But the thing is, it was like four of us talking about cannot make this up. We were talking about our own personal insurance liability coverages and
mhm,
why we have umbrellas and what's our umbrella
yeah.
size and boom. And then Joe looked back and said, did we just get rid? And I was like, yeah, we did.
Wow.
And yeah, but Joe is a sharp dude. And
And a like regular person at the same time.
yeah,
Yeah,
so a room full of ultra high operators,
hmm,
ultra high net worth, and everybody had the dream to build unicorns.
yeah.
Joe and Dave McFarland,
Oh
who
yeah,
if the audience don't know from Coterie,
yeah,
when those two dudes talk, the room is quiet. And
yeah,
of course, at the time, they came the furthest, in terms of seating rounds, and they had the most experience to talk
yeah.
about it. But
And Dave
like,
was also part of Clear Cover early on, so he's been through two.
if you don't know that story,
Yeah,
so those two guys, yeah, it was definitely there was a cut above like they knew things, they
yeah,
experienced things, they built things, and they're like industry icons, to my opinion. If you talk about InsurTech 2.0, they were the icons of 2.0s.
yeah. And I think they're more low key in a lot of
Yeah,
ways. Like
very.
Dave definitely is. Yeah, I'm really lucky to have gotten time with both of them. Uh, yeah, they're cool guys. Branch is in my second book, and I definitely like. I don't have a favorite case, but I might I'll leave it there.
I I love for you to launch a season on your show. I don't know if you have room for this on your show to talk about what InsurTech 3.0 look like. I was thinking that, and I was like, I have four shows right now. Do I want to create another show, right? I was thinking that in Vegas, like InsurTech 1.0 was about direct to consumer. Everyone came out, pounding their chest. InsurTech 2.0 was like, okay, direct to consumer was very expensive, and we're gonna work with agents and power them and work with them and have multiple streams of funnels, right?
Yeah,
I think InsurTech 3.0 is the lesson that we learned from 1.0, the process and things we added in 2.0, but 3.0 is with AI, right? The AI revolution is here. And there's a company called CGI. I did a quick interview from insurtech ITC. And they had like a small booth, which for later on I looked them up, $26 billion market trade, right? 30% revenue from insurance. And they're like, yeah, we're spending $1 billion in R&D on AI, and then we're gonna allow all of our customers to enjoy that benefit. So whoever is customer of CGI is gonna get the beneficiary return on their spend on $1 billion, right? And I am just really, really curious how those people who implement AI at a faster, earlier stage for their company, how is that going to show up in the actual wins and loss profitability column, you know? And I heard the CTO of Palantir recently dropped a video that they help a major US insurance carrier replace 88 underwriters with their AI.
Yeah.
And done 2 weeks of work in like one day. And he bragged about it on CNBC. And you know, underwriting is probably close to your heart, right? And that was the first time I ever heard anybody boast or brag about AI underwriter. Thoughts?
I don't know the validity behind what they're saying, but I would say I don't have any reason to not trust them, but there's some reasons to not trust them. It's not a new idea. I mean, there's been like Key is an AI-driven syndicate out of Lloyd's. I think it's Brit who's behind that. Like there's AI underwriting already. Um, I don't know what Palantir's doing or not doing because a lot of it is quite secretive. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room to do that. One of the open questions is how regulators look at it. But that just means there's an E&S opportunity there. I'm much less interested in the efficiency story than the underwriting result story. Like efficiency is great. 88 underwriters is only a useful number if you know the denominator. So if that numerator is out of 100,000, like how many tens of millions did it cost for that solution or to run that solution? And so you saved 88 underwriters, you know, on a team of 15,000. Like, I'm not impressed. I mean, it's fine, but that's a bad ROI unless your lack of those 88 underwriters is yielding a more profitable book of business. Then that's a great thing. But I don't care about the efficiency story. Like we should be efficient, but we're not in this business to be efficient. Like go run a manufacturing plant if that's what the only thing you care about. We're in this business to make underwriting profit, and that's about the loss ratio. So what are you doing on risk selection, on pricing, on changing the behavior of the risk once you've written it, on making smarter choices about renewals, on intervening in the right moments, like all that kind of stuff. What are you doing to make your claims decisions and what you offer when and how you navigate litigation and all the other things? Like that's where the money is. It's as simple as that. And we as an industry, I think, way over index on the efficiency story. And even that, like Palantir's story is not about laying people off, I'm sure, but they also know that's kind of the only thing they're going to be able to sell. And I got that conversation going with a similar but insurance specific data company that's like, we can improve the loss ratio. We see it with all of our clients, but A, no one will believe us, and B, no one wants to talk about it. They want a quick hit. And so they only listen when we talk about efficiency. So like how many heads can you save? How many minutes can you save out of processes? How many steps in a process can you cut out? That's all fine. But like, were you going to shave a point, 2 points? Like I did a lean project when I was running claims, and we had an opportunity we were growing very fast. So I needed to staff up, and it would save me about 25, 26% on staffing. You know, as if my team grew by a quarter basically without having to spend a dime, which is awesome. However, at the same time, my operating budget for my staff was like a little under 10 million bucks. and we were sitting on about 325 million in indemnity. So saving, even if I could get rid of the entire claims team and use AI for everything, including me, have no one working in claims whatsoever, I'm going to save less than $10 million. If I can affect a small change in that indemnity, and obviously I can't get rid of everyone, but even if I could, it would be a lot easier to find $8 to $10 million in savings on the indemnity side than it would be to figure out how to operate with zero staff. So like, I'm all for efficiency. We should operate efficiently, but that's not really what this game is about. So we should be focusing on driving a better loss ratio.
Yeah. If any audience want to go search that video up, look up Palantir CTO, insurance underwriter, AI. So stay on the thing, since you just said something that perked my ear.
Yeah.
We'll go back to that $100 million fantasy football draft. And
I thought I was out of that problem. All right.
what would you build it in if you can build anything?
What do you mean
But your only option is to spend this 100 million. You don't have more, you don't have less. Where would you build it in that you think have the most impact in insurance and the biggest opportunity?
But what do you mean by build it in? Like what market segment, what
Yeah.
geography, what?
So for trying to duplicate the next apply, try to build better apply, or try to build next ENS, the next CRC, what would you
Oh,
do?
okay. I thought it was already an insurance company, so I was just sort of assuming it's like a smaller size insured specialty lines play, maybe getting into a little bit of middle market, but not quite. That's what I was, because that's what I know. Like,
Mhm.
I have thoughts about the AMS space, Vertifor and Applied. I get thoughts about a number of things, but I'm not really an expert on those. I just pick up what I pick up and observe what I observe. But I've been an
Mhm.
operator especially in specialty lines for a while. So I
Mhm.
think I could actually offer something in that. And I do think like any money you take, if it can be strategic money or at least can be knowledgeable money, it makes a huge difference. So like I worked at a startup, our lead investors were wildly successful, but in the B2C space. So they came from backing some pretty major public, huge brands that like I could drop a bunch of names right now and people are like, wow, those investors are really smart. Um, all of their ideas and guidance and things they questioned us on were great questions, but not for this industry. So like they'd throw out, so it was a texting solution in claims, and they were like, well, what if you let a claims adjuster put down their corporate card and sign up like one off instead of doing it as an enterprise sale? And then all their peers sitting around are like, wow, that's so cool. Look what you're doing. I want that too. And then you start to take over the whole claims team. And I was like, yeah, it's a really cool idea in the B2C space. In an insurance company, if I'm running claims or I'm managing a team and I see that one of my adjusters is texting customers, I would fire them and I wouldn't be alone. Pretty much any carrier would be like, what did you do? You just started texting customers? Did you talk to compliance? Did you talk to like is that a secure system? Like you're talking to them about their claim over text? Can we do that? How are you documenting? Like that person would almost certainly get fired and that solution would never be allowed to sell to that insurer. So like really nice idea in a nut in a vacuum, but in our industry, that's death. So
Yeah.
and they were like brilliant people, really well intentioned. It wasn't that they were being idiots. They just don't understand the dynamics of a B2B enterprise sale in a highly regulated and highly risk averse context. You have to understand that if you want to break through. And we did, and we were very successful, and they still are. But that's where like having money that's just money, I don't think is the path. Like at least your lead, if not all of your money or close to it, should be from people who actually could add something. Because otherwise, unfortunately, it means they're going to take away because you're going to be stuck having to answer to and explain to people who really don't understand even just the sales cycle. Selling in the insurance industry takes a very long time. If your investors are used to like 3 to 4 months for sales to close, they are not going to be comfortable in insurance at all. And you're going to be dealing with their discomfort while you're trying to build your pipeline. That's like, that doesn't work.
When you say selling, are you referring to acquiring agencies, acquiring customers, B2B?
Yeah, I'm saying if you're a solution provider or service provider to the insurance industry, it's a very slow process to land those accounts. Agents will buy faster than insurers will, but as they get bigger and more complex, like, up to the CRC, Brown and Brown, whatever, like that kind of scale, it's going to be a very long, large enterprise SaaS sales process, understandably. If you're selling to like onesie, twosie, independent agents, that's fine. But you need a lot of feet on the street to sell to, one-off locations. So either way, there's going to be compromises in your sales strategy that someone who's used to selling, effectively on the internet, that may not work here. It might, depends what you're selling, but it probably won't. So, agents care that you understand what they're dealing with. They want to see you. They don't,
Yeah.
not every agent, it's like, it's important not to generalize, but the vast majority, if you're not of their market and you don't understand what their pressures are, and this is true for selling anything, like I always say, the best sales is when you get the person sitting across from you, the buyer, to fall back in their chair and just being like, oh my God, these people understand why my life is so hard. Like that's a successful sale because then they can't imagine buying from anyone else. But that takes understanding their life. And that's like I ran sales as a non-salesperson because I was selling to chief claims officers. So I just went in there talking to them as one of them about what we were all facing and why this is helpful. And they got it. But if I was a hardcore salesperson, it would never have worked because they get sold all day long. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Makes sense about the sales cycle. I haven't really given that a lot of thought before, and now it makes sense.
Well, and think about a startup, like you got runway to worry about. If you get,
Yeah.
18 to 36 months to land a sale, like who has runway for that? And who has investors who are like, no, we can sit for 3 years before you're like cash flow positive or longer. It's tough.
Yeah. Especially VC, they like to push
Yeah.
that pace for the next
That's
round, the
not
next round, the
right.
next round.
That's not the way that they work. And so they're thinking like you should have already been past 7 million in ARR, or whatever the number is. So we could have raised a series B now and I could get my valuation up. So
Hmm.
like, why is this taking so long? Like I had an account that I opened that didn't close for 39 months. Like I had left the startup for years at that point and it found 39 months and it closed. Like I'm glad it closed, but that's ridiculous. So, I
Yeah.
mean, think about, luckily, like there were lots of other deals that closed and they were doing really well, but like who has like, if that's your first deal to close and you're 3.5, like 3.25 years into your history, startups can't survive that. And certainly investors won't sit for that. So yeah, it's tough.
And I want to keep going with these softball questions, but I'm gonna drive Brian crazy. This was fun. We went through all the way 60 plus minutes now, and every time we chat, time just fly.
Well, I think we're making up for lost time.
All right, we need to do like an episode where, checklist to do things after this of get Nick on an episode and we chop it up together and just
I was
hear
gonna
him.
say, but we need to block like a half a day. If it's you, because Nick and I, we used to do like a Friday afternoon catch up and they were awesome, but it was like, it would be like, do you have anything? No. Do you have anything? No. All right, well, let's just talk for 15 minutes. And like an hour and a half later, we're still going because there's just so many ideas and so many interesting things to talk through.
One day, man, when I see you, we do some Chinese food, authentic, real Chinese food.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear all about your Beijing, your Hong Kong, your Macau, your Singapore, because
Well, you already heard most of it, so there's not that much
it's
left, but yeah.
but it's such a four different cities.
Yeah, totally.
First of all, they're kind of like in four different countries. Like even Hong Kong is now part of China, but they were like in the
It's
British
totally different.
Empire,
Yeah.
right? And Beijing is old China. Like Shanghai, Shenzhen is new China.
Yeah.
Beijing, even though it's new-ish, but still traditional, still capital, still legacy-ish.
Yeah.
Macau is like a lot of people don't understand. It's like 2.5 times the size of Vegas. That's what Macau is.
Yeah.
And then Singapore is like the pearl of Asia economic development and economic zone.
Yeah.
You have like a lot of foreigners from everywhere around the world in Singapore.
Yeah.
Like it will be just a cool episode to hear like Michael Ways, if we can get him on it, he live in Bangkok
Yeah.
and get him to talk about that one. Like all the insurance people from US that's abroad, that's a cool
Yeah.
episode, right?
There's not many.
Who
There's,
else can we get?
if you add in Brits, then you've got a bunch.
Who else can we get like another one to be a four people episode?
Oh, so you're thinking of that four box that you had talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
You got that. All right.
You keep on thinking. You probably know
Yeah,
more people than I do overseas.
I don't think I have a lot to offer that conversation, but I'm there for it. But
We can talk about
I
the
think I'll just be
experience.
listening.
Like a lot of the audience, like I think Asia is still on the rise. If you look at like, let's just take China for example. China have started to catch up in every segments except insurance. They're not global anything.
Well, Ping An has their tentacles in a lot of places. I mean, they invest heavily outside of China. And
Hmm.
I mean, Ping An is massive. What are they, the second largest insurer in the world? I mean, I remember when I was in Singapore, people were complaining about Ping An and they were still like early days and small.
Are they that big?
Yeah.
Holy cow! I need to go
So
look
Ping
it up
An is
and do my
Teresa
education.
did a case study on Ping An in the book, and I'm still blown away that we were able to get them. It's like, it almost doesn't get any bigger than them. But yeah, they're not that old. Like it's not even 30 years old. We started in 99, I think, or somewhere in the 90, maybe 90. I don't, it's a young company and
Were they
they're
backed by Warren Buffett as well?
no,
I know he have one of the Chinese life insurance that he backed.
Ping An's PNC mainly. I mean, they're in everything. They're health insurance too, but they're mainly
Hmm.
PNC. Yeah, he got into something else. But anyway, yeah, Ping An's a pretty incredible company for a number of reasons.
Brian, are you going to any of the InsurTech Asia event this year, this coming year?
No, not exactly. I'm speaking at I forget what they call it. InsurTech Australia is bringing me to Sydney in February, which will be my first time there. What's the name of it? The event is called InsurTech Live 25 on February 18th at Dalton House in Jones Bay Wharf in Sydney. I'm saying that like I know what it is, and I'm just reading it off of an email. Yeah, so that's the closest I'm getting to Asia, and I'm only there for 2 days, and then I got to fly home. But I'm excited to go to
We
Australia.
need to figure out a way how to go there and do a live podcast together.
Sure, I'm
That would
game.
be super cool.
Yeah,
All right.
if you find the funding for it, I'm game for going.
Let me think through this one.
All right. Yeah, no, I would say this was a cool conversation. It mostly just has me scared for anyone listening to it. It's like, dude, you don't even mention me. You drop all these names and you don't even say mine. It's like, oh no.
All right. That's for before we go for the audience, let's do a selfie and prepare them for this drop. This is gonna be a fun drop. 1, 2, 3. All right. Well, Brian, thank you very much for coming on to this episode.
Thanks for having me on.
And what a fun episode. I don't think I've ever asked you some of the questions I asked anybody else, and now I might add it to my podcast for the future.
They're great questions. I just hated them at the same time, but they're great questions. I should have thought about this more. Yeah, I mean, you got me thinking.
All right. Well, we might have to do a second episode and let those people
All
that
right.
you dropped know,
I'll come
hey, by
prepared
the way,
next
you are
time.
on my Avenger team.
Okay, that's fair.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Have a great
Thanks,
one.
Jeff.